Julian and Clara found their lives forever altered in the rugged peaks of northern Cascadia, a change still unfolding 15 years later. Julian, 32 in 2003, served as a paramedic, while Clara, 29, was a veterinary surgeon specializing in large animals. Their paths crossed during an emergency, a barbed wire incident involving a prize stallion, where their unspoken teamwork forged an immediate connection. 2 years later, they married. They owned a secluded property deep within the Cascade Range, 40 miles from the sparse settlement of Cedar Creek, which offered little more than a gas station, a diner, and a general store. This 20-acre forest sanctuary, inherited from Clara's logging grandfather, housed a simple 2-bedroom cabin with a wood stove and a clear stream. It was their escape from Havenwood, their city life, a place where cell service and internet were non-existent, replaced by the wind and the calls of ravens. For 3 years they had yearned for a child, enduring 2 miscarriages, the second particularly devastating, having already chosen names and planned a nursery. The silence surrounding their unfulfilled hopes grew suffocating in their city apartment. So when Clara proposed a month-long retreat to the mountain house, a first for them, Julian readily agreed. They desperately needed to rediscover themselves, free from the appointments, medications, and quiet despair. They arrived on a crisp, late September Friday, autumn's first chill in the air, and leaves just beginning to turn. A stop in Cedar Creek for supplies brought them face-to-face with Agnes, the long-standing general store owner, who offered a local's wary glance and a warning about early snow and tricky roads. Stocked with canned goods and propane, they continued their ascent on the winding Forest Service Road. The first week unfolded in an almost unsettling quiet. A tranquil rhythm of sunrises, percolated coffee, and long walks. Clara captured the forest's delicate beauty with her camera, while Julian chopped wood, mended a leaky gutter, and immersed himself in paperback mysteries. Evenings were spent cooking simple meals, playing cards by lantern light, and talking, not of babies or work, but of shared memories, cabin improvements, and future gardens. It felt like a slow, deliberate untangling of tightly wound knots. Yet subtle signs hinted they weren't alone. On the 5th day, Julian found the trash bin overturned, its contents scattered, not torn. Clara dismissed it as raccoons, though her voice lacked conviction. That night, from their bed, Julian heard heavy footsteps in the underbrush, distinct from deer, slow and deliberate. He saw nothing in the darkness, but Clara admitted she'd heard it too, not wanting to alarm him. They laughed it off, attributing it to mountain quiet and overactive imaginations. The undeniable sound came on the 10th day, near dusk. After an afternoon hike to the stream, they sat on rocks, watching the fading light, Clara more relaxed than Julian had seen her in months. Then it came, a sound between a human scream and an animal bellow, echoing through the trees, raising the hair on Julian's arms. Clara's body stiffened. "That's a person," she whispered, her eyes wide with alarm. Julian's paramedic training instantly kicked in. He was on his feet, mentally inventorying their first aid supplies, the barely functional radio. The sound came again, longer, more drawn out, definitely uphill. They moved quickly, following the direction, light fading, temperature dropping. Hypothermia would be a critical risk for an injured person. They pushed through thick underbrush, their footsteps muffled by needles and moss. Julian's heart pounded with exertion and adrenaline. The sound came a third time, startlingly close, 50 yards ahead. A strange, wrong quality to it nagged at Julian, but he pushed it away. Someone needed help. Rounding a stand of cedars, they entered a small clearing, and there she was. Julian struggled to reconcile the memory with words. She lay on her side against a boulder, one arm protectively over her swollen belly, the other gripping the moss. Covered in thick reddish-brown hair, matted with sweat and dirt, she was enormous, at least 7 feet long, even curled, with shoulders broader than any human. Her face, a disturbing blend of human and not, had heavy brows, a flat nose and a pronounced jaw. But her eyes, dark brown, almost black, fixed on them with unmistakable awareness, filled with pain, fear, and desperate intelligence. Blood pooled beneath her, smeared on the boulder. A strong, musky scent mingled with the metallic tang of blood and something else, wild and animal, yet eerily familiar. The biological urgency of a woman in labor. Her breathing was harsh, labored gasps. As they stood frozen, she emitted a low growl, but her hand moved protectively over her belly, and Julian understood. She was in labor, and it was going terribly wrong. Clara moved first, stepping forward slowly, hands open, making soothing sounds. "Hey there," she murmured. "It's okay. We're going to help you. I know you're scared, but we're going to help." The creature, the woman, watched Clara with those impossibly human eyes, her lips pulled back slightly, revealing large, strong teeth, more for grinding than tearing. She whimpered, her hand relaxing slightly on her belly. Clara glanced back at Julian, her face adopting the calm, focused professional mask she wore at the clinic. "Julian," she said, eyes still on the creature, "I need you to go back to the house. Get my medical kit, the big one from the truck, towels, clean water, anything sterile, and a tarp or blanket. Move fast, but come back slow and make noise so she knows you're coming." Julian nodded, though she couldn't see, and ran. His mind reeled. What was this thing? His rational brain sought to categorize it, but nothing fit. Bears, mountain lions, wildlife attacks, none compared to the intelligence in her eyes, the human-like way she held herself. She was a person, or close enough that the distinction dissolved. He burst into the house, grabbing everything. Clara's veterinary kit, heavy with surgical gloves, clamps, sutures, antiseptic, animal pain medication, towels, a pot of water, a lighter to boil it, the wool blanket from their bed. As he shoved things into a backpack, his hands shook. This was insane, but leaving her to die was unthinkable, not for a paramedic, not for a human, not for someone who understood the fight for an unborn life. He returned quickly, slowing his approach and calling out softly. Clara knelt beside the creature, speaking in that low, soothing voice. The creature's breathing worsened, her abdomen contracting visibly. Clara looked up, pale but determined. "This is going to be rough. I've done difficult births, mostly horses, but I don't know her anatomy. I'll have to guess and hope." Julian knelt, laying out supplies. "You've got this," he said, feigning confidence. "You're the best, and I'm here to help. Tell me what you need." The next hour was a blur of blood, effort, and primal sounds. The creature, now a mother in Julian's mind, seemed to understand their intent. She didn't fight them, though pain brought forth cries and tensed muscles. Her hand, brushing Julian's arm, was incredibly strong, but she pulled back immediately as if careful not to hurt him. Clara worked with steady hands, checking dilation, trying to determine the baby's position, essentially blind. The mother's anatomy was similar to a human's, but larger, denser, subtly different. The baby came suddenly, a small, wet form covered in dark fur. It was the size of a human infant, but with longer limbs and a face that was ancient and other. For a terrifying moment, it was still. Clara flipped it, cleared its airway, and rubbed its chest. The baby coughed, sputtered, and let out a thin, wailing cry, almost human but deeper, more resonant. The mother sobbed, reaching a shaking hand towards her child. Clara quickly wrapped the infant in a towel, holding it close, while Julian returned his attention to the mother. But things worsened. The bleeding intensified, soaking through the towels. Julian applied pressure, tried uterine massage, everything he knew, but the hemorrhage wouldn't stop. Her breathing became shallow, her eyes lost focus. They were losing her. Clara, baby, clutched to her chest, laid her other hand on the mother's face, murmuring reassurances. Her baby was alive, healthy. She was brave. The mother's eyes found Clara's, then drifted to the bundle in her arms. She made a soft cooing sound, her hand lifting slightly, trembling, wanting to touch her child but unable. Then her hand fell, her chest rose one last time, and she was still. The silence was broken only by the baby's soft mewling and Clara's quiet sobs. Julian, hands bloody, felt exhaustion and grief wash over him. They'd saved the baby, lost the mother. Clara, rocking the baby, looked at him. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "We can't leave her, and we can't just take the baby away from wherever she came from." Julian looked around, suddenly aware of their vulnerability. The sun had set, the forest dark and cold. "We need to move," he said, his legs shaking. "Get somewhere safe, figure this out. We'll come back for her in the morning, bury her properly. But now the baby needs warmth." Clara nodded, the baby now quiet against her chest, small hands gripping the towel. They gathered what they could, leaving the rest, and made their way back through the darkening forest. The walk felt longer, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a start. The baby made soft, grunting sounds, and Clara constantly spoke to it, promising safety and care. The sight of the cabin lights brought a rush of relief. Inside, they bolted the door, standing breathless, trying to process. Clara laid the baby gently on blankets. In the lamplight, they saw him clearly. A fine, dark hair covered his body, thicker on his head and back. His face was strange but not ugly, features compressed, nose flatter, brow prominent, ears higher and rounder than a human baby's. His dark eyes, when they opened, were alert, tracking movement with advanced focus. His hands were larger, fingers thick. He was unusually warm, his heartbeat fast but strong. They spent hours in controlled panic, trying to understand his needs. Clara mixed powdered milk and sugar, warming it. He latched immediately, sucking with surprising strength, small hands wrapping around Clara's fingers. He finished the bottle, a satisfied grunt following, eyes drooping. Clara held him, patting his back until he burped, a very human sound that brought hysterical laughter. She looked at Julian, face streaked with tears and dirt. "Julian, I think we need to keep him. I know how it sounds, what we'd be taking on, but we can't call anyone, can't hand him over. He'd end up in a lab, studied, poked, never knowing kindness. His mother trusted us." Julian sank into a chair, mind spinning. Everything she said resonated, but it meant a life of lies, secrecy, and the unknown. What would he become? What would his kind do? But looking at Clara, holding him with wonder and love, he knew. "Okay," he said quietly. "We keep him. We figure this out as we go, together. No secrets, no second guessing, all in." Clara's face broke into her first real smile in months. "Together," she affirmed. That first night, they barely slept. The baby, whom they eventually named Finn, woke every few hours to feed. He was remarkably strong, far more so than a human newborn, kicking and waving his arms with advanced coordination. By morning, he'd rolled over, an act human babies typically master months later. They took turns holding, feeding, and changing makeshift towel diapers, learning his sounds. He had a range of vocalizations, soft grunts of contentment, sharp barks of frustration, a mewling cry for hunger, and a strange low hum when falling asleep. As the sun rose, Julian knew he had to return to the clearing. Clara stayed with Finn, who seemed calmer in her arms. Shovel in hand, Julian retraced their path. In daylight, the clearing seemed less ominous. The mother's body lay where they'd left it, stiffening, blood dried. A crushing sense of responsibility weighed on him. Burying her there was too exposed. He needed a more hidden spot. It took most of the morning. He found a place deeper in the forest near an old-growth cedar, partially hidden by fallen logs. Wrapping her body in the tarp, he was again struck by her size and weight, easily 400 to 500 pounds. Moving her was back-breaking work. The ground, packed with roots and rocks, made digging slow. By the time the hole was deep enough, his hands were blistered and bleeding. He lowered her gently, covered her with dirt, and piled rocks to deter animals. It was all he could do. Leaning on the shovel, he spoke a few words, an acknowledgement that she mattered, that they would care for her son. He returned to the house, exhausted, aching, feeling irrevocably changed. The days settled into a strange new rhythm. Finn quickly rejected powdered milk, preferring a mix of pureed banana, applesauce, and cooked meat. He grew visibly each day, limbs lengthening, features sharpening. By the end of the first week, he was alert and active, crawling, pushing himself up, grabbing everything. His strength was remarkable. He could grip Julian's finger hard enough to hurt, once yelping in pain when Finn pulled his ear. Clara gently taught him to be gentle. They called him Little One or Buddy, but nothing felt right until he made sounds like ba, ba, ba. Clara suggested Bo, close enough to his own sounds and normal enough not to raise questions. Finn seemed to respond to Finn, his eyes tracking the speaker, a happy chirping sound indicating recognition. So focused on Finn, they were slow to notice the changes outside. Tools left on the porch were subtly rearranged. The firewood stack was meticulously restacked, taller and more precise. Clara noticed pine branches carefully covering frost-damaged herbs. Huge footprints, twice Julian's size, appeared near the stream. On the 8th night, they heard it. 3 sharp raps on the house wall, evenly spaced. Julian grabbed a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the tree line, seeing only shadows. 4 quick knocks came from the back. Silence. Then heavy thumps on the roof, directly above them, creaking old beams. Clara gripped Julian's hand, sweaty. 30 seconds passed. Then footsteps moved across the roof, a scrape of claws down the siding, and then nothing. They waited another hour before Julian checked all locks. They didn't sleep. The next morning, Julian found long scratches in the moss on the shingles and a tuft of reddish-brown hair caught on a nail near the chimney. It was coarse and thick, like Finn's mother's hair, like Finn's own lighter fur. "They know he's here," Clara whispered. "They're watching us, trying to communicate or warn us or claim him." The realization settled. They were not just caring for Finn, they were being observed, judged, perhaps allowed. The pattern continued. The knocking occurred almost nightly, varied, rhythmic, almost conversational. They found offerings, carefully stacked stones, woven branches, once a gutted, cleaned rabbit on the porch, a trade for their care of Finn. They never saw the givers, but they knew. Sometimes, taking Finn outside, Julian felt the prickling sensation of being watched. He'd turn, but only trees and shadows remained, and the sense of something large and intelligent studying them. Finn grew astonishingly. By what they estimated as 1 month, he was as developed as a human 6-month-old, crawling with speed, pulling himself up, climbing anything. He was insatiably curious, learning by touching, grabbing, tasting. He opened cabinets, pushed chairs to reach counters. He was unnervingly smart, constantly watching them, mimicking their actions. When Julian tied his boots, Finn would try to copy the motion on his small moccasins. When Clara cooked, he watched every step. Communication developed gradually. He had his own language of sounds, which they learned to interpret, but they also taught him theirs. Pointing to objects, repeating names, water, food, light, he would try to repeat them. His words slurred, his mouth not quite built for human speech. His first clear word was "Ma" to Clara, who wept. "Yes, I'm your mama." He added "pa," "eat," "no," "go," "hurt," maybe 15 or 20 words total. Combined with his own sounds and body language, they mostly understood him. Julian took extended leave. Clara resigned, inventing stories about family and online education. They told friends they were focusing on their relationship at the mountain house, a partial truth. The isolation was harder than expected. Every trip to Cedar Creek for supplies, every couple of weeks, was fraught with anxiety. They left Finn locked inside with food and water, rushing through shopping. Agnes at the general store asked increasingly pointed questions. Strange sounds, unusual tracks, reports of missing livestock. They feigned ignorance, enjoying the peace. Julian always felt she knew more, that mountain people had their own unspoken understanding of the deep forest. As Finn approached what they guessed was 3 months, equivalent to a human toddler, outside activity intensified. The knocking became more frequent, more varied, sometimes hours long, like music or communication. Larger offerings appeared, a fresh deer haunch, enough meat for a week. Their firewood stack was replenished overnight with wood they hadn't cut. It felt like a trade. Their care for their young, their protection and provision in return. One morning, Julian found fresh human boot prints near the stream, facing the house with 3 smoked cigarette butts. Someone had been watching. Following the prints up the ridge, they disappeared onto rocky ground. But he found a crude campsite, a fire ring, scuffed earth, and on a tree, a carved drawing of a tall, long-armed figure with a prominent brow. Below it, "I know what you got." Julian's stomach dropped. Someone knew. He ran back, heart hammering. Clara was playing with Finn, who gleefully knocked down blocks. He told her, her face drained of color. "We have to leave," she said immediately. But Julian knew they couldn't outrun this. This was their home. They spent the day on high alert, Finn inside, curtains drawn. That night, the knocking didn't come, an ominous silence. The next morning, Clara made a decision. She walked with Finn to the edge of the tree line, to a spot where they often heard the knocking. She spoke clearly into the forest, saying they were caring for him, loved him, wanted to keep him safe. But someone else was out there, someone who might hurt him, and they needed help, protection. She spoke from her heart, Finn on her hip, humming softly. When she came back, her face was calm. "I did what I could," she said. "The rest is up to them." That afternoon, Julian was in the shed when Clara screamed. He dropped the axe and sprinted. He burst in to find her at the kitchen window, hand over her mouth, pointing. Finn, who must have unlatched the back door, stood at the yard's edge, staring into the tree line. Julian moved to grab him, but Clara caught his arm. "Wait," she whispered. Hidden behind a cedar was a tall, dark-haired figure, watching Finn with intense focus. They stared for what felt like hours. Then, Finn raised his small hand, almost a wave, and made a deep hum, followed by 2 sharp barks. The figure straightened, enormous, at least 8 feet tall. It made a softer, complex sound, whistles and hums. Finn responded with his own sounds. Julian realized with a shock they were communicating. Finn knew this language, had always known it, spoke it with a fluency their taught words couldn't match. The exchange lasted another minute, then the figure stepped back into shadows and vanished. Finn toddled back inside. Clara scooped him up, sobbing into his hair. He patted her face, making concerned humming sounds. That night, the knocking returned, but different, less aggressive, more rhythmic, almost conversational. 3 knocks, pause, 5 knocks, long pause, 2 knocks. Finn, drowsing, responded with his own hums and clicks in his sleep, maintaining his end of a dialogue they couldn't understand. The next few weeks were tense. They watched for the hunter, but saw no more boot prints or camps. They did see more of the forest people, as they privately called them, never close, never at the same time. Glimpses of figures moving through distant trees, shadows too large to be deer. Once, at dawn, Julian saw one sitting on the woodpile, facing the house, breath misting. Then it stood and walked away with impossible grace. Finn continued to develop in ways that amazed and worried them. By 6 months, he was cognitively and physically advanced as a human 3 or 4-year-old. He walked, ran with a rolling gait, and climbed constantly, found on bookshelves, rafters, even wedged between the refrigerator and ceiling, looking down with mischief. He was strong enough to move furniture, open jars, turn doorknobs. His communication improved, 30 or 40 short words, basic sentences. Finn hungry? Go outside. Mama sad. But he preferred his own language, its pitches and rhythms, his body language conveying as much as any words. They celebrated his first birthday, though his age was an estimation, with a cake Clara made and a carved wooden truck from Julian. Finn was delighted, chirping, clutching the truck, then immediately trying to dismantle it. He was the size of a human 6-year-old, stocky, powerful, his hair thicker, coarser, his features more ape-like as he aged. But his eyes remained startlingly human, intelligent, emotional. He loved them fiercely, bringing gifts, rocks, pine cones, once a live beetle. He sought comfort when hurt or scared, pressing his face into their shoulders, whimpering. The outside world felt distant, unreal. They had supplies delivered, coordinating drop-offs at the gate. They stopped returning calls, let their phones die. Their world had shrunk to 20 acres and one extraordinary child. Then the hunter came. Early autumn, almost a year after they found Finn's mother, the air crisp, leaves turning. They had relaxed, thinking the watcher had moved on. Finn was outside, Clara watching from the porch, Julian making coffee. He loved the outdoors, exploring, climbing, throwing stones. He understood when silence was important. Julian heard the shot before he processed it, a flat crack. Clara's face went white. He saw her move. Then he was running, coffee cup shattering. He burst out to see Finn down near the woodpile, Clara already beside him. Finn made high-pitched, keening cries, clutching his right shoulder where dark blood spread. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," Clara chanted, hands fluttering. Julian looked to the tree line. 50 yards away, partially concealed, a man in camouflage held a scoped rifle, staring with shock and vindication. Their eyes met. The man began to raise the rifle again. Something primal surged in Julian. Rage. Terror. He opened his mouth to shout, but he never got the chance. Something huge moved from the forest behind the hunter, impossibly fast, silent. One moment the hunter aimed, the next he was on the ground, rifle flying, a massive, dark-haired figure on top of him. The hunter screamed, a sound worse than Finn's cries, full of agony. More figures emerged, 3, 4, converging. His screams abruptly cut off. The forest went still, save for wet, tearing sounds. "Julian!" Clara's voice cut through his paralysis. "Julian, I need you. Help me with him." He tore his eyes away, dropped to his knees. Finn's blood was hot, sticky. The bullet hit high on his right shoulder, between clavicle and scapula. A lot of blood. They needed to stop it fast. Clara worked on autopilot, ripping her shirt for a pressure bandage, her face a professional mask, but terror beneath it. This was their child, shot. Everything they feared was happening. They got him inside, onto the kitchen table. Clara's veterinary skills took over. Julian held Finn down. He was strong, even in pain, fighting, crying out in his own language. Pain, fear, mama, mama, please. The bullet had gone through, but the exit wound was messy, muscle and probably scapula damaged. Clara worked with steady hands, cleaning, stitching, bandaging, using most of their supplies. Finn cried, eyes rolling with pain and confusion. When it was done, bleeding stopped. Pain medication administered. They wrapped him in blankets, holding him, whispering reassurances until he drifted into uneasy sleep. Only then did Julian look at Clara. "The hunter. Should we check?" Her eyes were flat, cold. "They took care of it. Leave it alone." He knew she was right. Whatever had happened, it was justice, and they had no right to interfere. That night, the knocking was louder, more insistent but not threatening. It felt like a question. Was he okay? Had their young one survived? Clara went to the door, opened it slightly. He's hurt, but he'll live. We're taking care of him. He's going to be okay. The knocking stopped. A long silence, then a low, mournful call from the forest, answered by others. Grief and relief mingled. But Finn didn't bounce back. The wound healed, no infection at first, but his fever wouldn't break. It climbed steadily. He became less responsive, sleeping more, eating less, skin burning hot. They tried everything. Compresses, reducers, antibiotics. Nothing helped. His body fought something unseen and he was losing. On the third day, Finn barely opened his eyes. His breathing was shallow, fast, heartbeat irregular. His gaze was confused. Clara held him constantly, rocking, singing childhood songs. Julian sat beside them, hand on Finn's small chest, willing his heart to beat, to fight. That night, the forest people came closer than ever. They heard low, mournful calls, saw shadows pass the windows. Once, a huge, hairy, impossibly sad face pressed against the glass, looking at Finn, then pulled back. They knew. He was dying. They came to bear witness. Just before dawn, Finn opened his eyes, clearer now, focused. He looked at Clara, then Julian, made a soft sighing sound and said in his slurred, thick voice, "Ma, Pa, love." 3 words holding everything they were, everything they tried to be, everything they failed to protect him from. Clara sobbed. Julian couldn't speak, his throat closed, eyes burning. He just held Finn's small hand, hoping he knew. Finn looked toward the window, toward the unseen faces. He made a deep chest sound, one of his own language. From outside came an answering chorus of calls, rising and falling like a song. Finn's face relaxed, like he'd heard what he needed. His eyes closed. His chest rose once more. Gently, he was gone. The silence was absolute. Even the forest sounds stopped. Elena held him for a long time, rocking, not crying anymore. Julian sat beside her, hand on his cooling body, feeling something fundamental break inside him. As light grew, he heard soft footsteps around the house, then that deep, mournful call. He knew what they had to do. They wrapped Finn carefully in his favorite blue-striped blanket and carried him outside. The sun touched the treetops, painting gold and gray. Standing at the clearing's edge were 4 of them, 3 adults, 1 younger. They stood still. As Julian and Clara walked toward Finn's mother's grave, they followed, not close, a strange funeral procession. The grave was overgrown, but the stones remained. They laid Finn beside her, mother and child reunited. They buried him with his wooden truck and a small photo of their strange family. As they worked, the forest people stood in a loose circle, silent witnesses. When they finished, placing new stones, they began to sing, a rising and falling chorus of grief or remembrance. When it faded, they left, one by one, melting back into the forest until only one remained. He was huge, bigger than the others, dark brown and silver-gray hair, massive shoulders, weathered, scarred face. He stepped forward slowly. Julian and Clara stood their ground. He stopped feet from the graves, looked down, then raised his head, looking at them. Julian saw the same devastating grief in his eyes. The loss of a child transcends species. He stepped closer, close enough for Julian to smell him, earth and musk and forest. He reached out slowly, placing one massive hand gently on Clara's shoulder. She sobbed. He made a soft rumbling sound, almost a purr. Comfort. He touched Julian's shoulder the same way, a wordless gesture. I know. I understand. I share this. His eyes were wet. Then he did something Julian would never forget. He reached up to his own right shoulder, the same spot where Finn was shot, and traced his fingers down his arm, mirroring Finn's gesture, acknowledging the violence, claiming it, remembering it. He straightened, his expression changing. grief remained, but joined by something cold, focused. He looked toward their house, then beyond, toward the wider world that killed his child. This wasn't over for him. People hunted his kind, saw them as trophies or experiments. He would remember. He made a low, deep sound, felt more than heard. Answering calls came from different directions. There were more of them than Julian imagined, a whole people hidden, surviving. They had touched the edges of this world, allowed to love and lose one of their young. He turned, walked away with impossible silence and grace. He paused at the clearing's edge, looked back. Julian raised a hand. He dipped his head. Then he was gone. Julian and Clara were alone with the graves, the rising sun, and the terrible weight of everything. They stayed another week, barely functioning. The knocking, the offerings, the sense of being watched, all stopped. It was as if they'd said goodbye, leaving Julian and Clara to their grief. One morning, Julian found fresh boot prints and cigarette butts near the stream again. The hunter hadn't been alone. Someone else knew. The house no longer felt safe. They left on a cold October morning, loading what they could, abandoning the rest. Julian walked to the graves one last time, leaving wildflowers, promising to remember. Driving down the long driveway, he saw a figure at the tree line, tall, still, watching them go. He lifted his hand in a final goodbye. The figure raised a long arm in response. Then they rounded a bend, and it was gone. They returned to Havenwood, tried to rebuild. Julian went back to work. Clara found a new clinic. They said they needed time to grieve personal losses, enough to stop questions. They moved, sold the mountain property without ever returning. The grief was enormous, complicated. How do you mourn a child the world doesn't know existed? They went through motions, smiled, said they were fine, but they were hollow, ghosts. Years passed. They stayed together, bonded by something nothing else could touch. They were the only two who knew the truth, who woke reaching for a child who wasn't there. They never tried for another baby. How could any human child feel like enough after Finn? They don't talk about it much, but sometimes late at night one will say, "Remember his first word?" or "Remember how he hummed?" The other says, "Yes, I remember." They hold hands, letting memories wash over them. Julian kept the carved wood from the truck. Clara kept the blanket, folded in a drawer she never opens. Julian wonders if Finn understood at the end that they loved him, tried their best, would have done anything to save him. He wonders if Finn's people remember them, if they tell stories, or if Julian and Clara are a footnote, another tragedy. He wonders if the big male is still out there, thinking of his lost son and the strange couple who buried him. Julian hopes he knows they never betrayed them, that their secret will die with them. What Julian knows for certain is that when his time comes, the last thing he'll see is Finn's face, that strange, beautiful face, looking up with trust and love, saying, "Ma, Pa, love." He'll know he was lucky, that despite the grief and secret, he was a father for a little while, loved completely and loved in return. That matters. Sometimes Julian and Clara drive into the mountains, not to their old property, but other wild places. They walk into the forest, sit quietly, listening, hoping to hear that knock or call, hoping for a sign they still survive. They never do. But every once in a while, Julian feels that prickling on his neck, that sense of being watched. He looks into the trees, or a dark hollow, and thinks he sees something, almost human, intelligent eyes looking back. He blinks, and it's gone. People ask Julian if he believes in Bigfoot. He doesn't laugh or dismiss it. He says, "I think there's a lot in this world we don't understand." Because belief is the wrong word. He doesn't believe, he knows. He held their young, he heard their voices. He stood at a grave with one of them, sharing grief beyond language. They're real, they're out there, people in their own right, with families, grief, love, all the complicated emotions humans claim exclusively. They're watching, judging, surviving in a world that would destroy them if it knew they existed. Maybe it's for the best they remain hidden, subjects of jokes and blurry photos. Because if the world ever truly knew, Julian has seen what humans do to things they don't understand. So he keeps the secret. Clara keeps the secret. They live their lives with this enormous, invisible thing at their center. They are good at pretending, at acting normal, at hiding that they are forever changed, marked by those months when they stepped outside the human world into something older, wilder, more real. They are parents of a child who never existed in official records, buried under stones and pine needles in a forest grave no one else will visit. They carry him always, in their hearts, their memories, in the way they see the world now, with eyes that know there's more to it than most people will ever understand. And that's enough. It has to be, because it's all they have.